Well, good morning. Many people are waking up today to see much of our state underwater. It has been an incredibly difficult evening, and I want to begin by thanking all our volunteers, our SES volunteers, RFS, those in evacuation centres who have worked through the night providing care and support for people who need it. I want to acknowledge the trauma and suffering that many people have gone through throughout the evening, having to leave their homes in the middle of the night in driving rain. But my message to you is that we will get through this. For those people who have lost their homes, as we've seen up north, for those who have had to leave their homes in the last 24 hours, for those who are still waiting assistance, and to all our volunteers, we are with you side by side through this difficult and challenging time. I want to thank everybody, as we've been mentioning at press conferences throughout the week, for following the instructions of our SES. Those evacuation orders, the evacuation warnings. We have currently 500,000 people across our state who are subject to either one of those warnings or one of those orders. If you are subject to one of those evacuation warnings, please get ready. Please ensure that you are ready to evacuate. If you are subject to one of those evacuation orders, please get out. Those instructions are not there for the sake of it. They're there to keep you and your family safe. And I want to thank everybody for following those orders, because not only do they keep you safe, importantly, they keep our volunteers safe, who are on the front line, ensuring that everybody is looked after during this difficult time. So can I thank everybody for the efforts that they are making in following those orders. In addition to that, we do believe that things will get worse right before they get better here in our state. We'll have the Bureau speak shortly, but we do expect, particularly in the Hawkesbury region, that the floods will be worse than they were last year, and that we see more torrential rain and flooding in Newcastle and Hunter over the course of the day. And if you're not sure in relation to whether you are subject to an evacuation order or an evacuation warning, please continue to listen to the radio. Please contact the SES on 132 500 or through their website to obtain that information. The challenge we're facing right now is a battle on two fronts. I was up north with the Minister yesterday, where we are seeing the recovery underway, and in addition to that recovery, we are currently dealing with the immediate response here in Sydney. And as a result, today we'll be standing up the Crisis Policy Committee of Cabinet to ensure that recovery takes place in the best way possible, that works in with Resilience New South Wales, with Shane Fitzsimmons and the SES here, to ensure a whole of government response is provided. So whilst we're dealing with the immediate right here in Sydney, I do want to say, particularly to those people in communities in the north, many people today in the Northern Rivers and over the last 24 hours have returned home, and they've returned home to devastating scenes. And my message to you is that we will be with you, that as soon as it's possible for our SES and RFS teams to come into those areas, we will be there to provide that support, to get the clean-up conducted as quickly as possible. We know that many people are returning to heartbreaking scenes, and it is devastating. But that support will be there. And whilst those devastating scenes are in place, what I saw yesterday as well is such high spirit. And through adversity, our state is stronger. And to see so many volunteers, not just from New South Wales, but from other states, coming in to lend a hand, to provide that care and support for people is overwhelming. And to all of you, can I say thank you, because it is that spirit of service that makes our state great, and it's that spirit of service that I know will ensure, through these difficult times, that we will get through. It's been a very difficult 3 years here in New South Wales, whether that's been on the back of drought, fires, floods and floods again, on top of the pandemic. But through every single moment, our state and our people have stood tall. And I can say on behalf of the government that I lead, that we will be there every step of the way, that we've got through every one of those difficulties of the past, and we will get through this together again. I'm now going to pass to Minister Steph Cook, who will provide an update as well in relation to the operational matters that are occurring across our state. Steph.
Well, thank you, Premier. This morning I am worried about the communities across southwest Sydney, Sydney more generally, the Central Coast and the Hunter. I know you're tired. It's been a long night. Many of you have had to evacuate from your homes over this time. It's been a sleepless night for many people. We know that you are weary, but we need you to stay with us. We need you to keep listening out to the warnings, to the information that our emergency services organisations, particularly our combat agency, the SES, are putting out this morning off the back of the advice that we are receiving from the Bureau of Meteorology, who we will hear from next. The situation is changing. Right across the state at the moment, we have 76 evacuation orders in place covering 200,000 people, and we have 18 evacuation warnings across New South Wales covering nearly 300,000 people. Combined, we have 500,000 people in our state right now who are either the subject of an evacuation warning or an evacuation order. And we need each and every one of you to continue listening to the advice provided by our emergency services organisations. If you are asked to leave your home, please do so. Please do not put yourself or your family at risk, and please don't put the lives of our emergency services volunteers at risk because they need to come and rescue you because you've found yourself in a very difficult situation. Of course, as Sydney is bracing itself and the Central Coast and the Hunter are bracing themselves for treacherous weather conditions today, we must not and we will not take our eye off the people of the Northern Rivers region, that northeast part of our state that has been so deeply impacted by this weather event over the past few days. To that end, we are sending in additional fire and rescue strike teams, ADF personnel, RFS volunteers and workers. Over the next 24 hours, we will see an additional 400 personnel pour into that part of the world as we commence the very difficult task of cleaning up, commencing recovery and getting people back on their feet as quickly as possible. The challenge is going to be enormous. The EPA and Public Works are working very closely with local governments in that area around waste disposal and whatever else is required to get the recovery efforts up and running as quickly as possible, to get people back in their homes as quickly as possible so that they can commence what will be a very, very long road ahead in relation to clean-up and recovery. Finally, this morning, before I pass over to the Bureau, and then Commissioner Carleen York will provide a detailed update this morning in relation to the efforts of the SES. I'd like to once again send a very big thank you to our volunteers all over the state, up and down the East Coast, to those of us that have given so much of our time over the past 2 years, standing up for disaster after disaster. We know that you're tired. I had the great honour and privilege of catching up with SES volunteers yesterday in Grafton, where in the preceding 24 hours they had conducted 38 flood rescues, just that one unit. They're tired, but they are determined to keep pushing through. And I say to you, thank you very, very much. I know that you're tired. We need to keep going. I know that you will. But just to really extend my deep thanks and gratitude on behalf of the communities that you are helping and on behalf of the New South Wales Government and on behalf of every single citizen in New South Wales. We owe you an enormous debt of gratitude. We know that you will keep going right to the end. And we are there to support you and, of course, the community is so deeply impacted by this current weather situation. So for those people in Sydney, once again, and the Central Coast and the Hunter, please stay on alert today. The situation is changing rapidly, as you will hear next from the Bureau of Meteorology. And we need you to heed the advice of emergency services organisations over the next 24 hours and over the coming days ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and good morning, everyone. First off, I do just want to reiterate comments that we've already heard. It has been a really tough time for much of us here in New South Wales, with flooding being experienced right across coastal parts from the northern New South Wales all the way down to the south, and there's a lot more to come as well. Starting in the north, while things have eased temporarily up there, there's still major to moderate flooding ongoing on numerous rivers. Unfortunately, it is raining in some areas up there right now. Only light, but during the day today we're likely to see showers and possibly severe thunderstorms that will lead to localised, intense and dangerous flash flooding. Now, if these storms do fall just upstream of you, particularly if you are on any of these rivers, that can lead to renewed river level rises. They will be localised, not widespread, but if you are in that area, please stay up to date with the latest forecasts and warnings today, as some of those storms are already occurring in southeast Queensland and they're likely to impact parts of the northern rivers and our flood-affected residents and communities in that part of the world later this morning and throughout much of the day today. Obviously, of major concern as well is this from the Central Coast, Hunter and down into the Sydney metropolitan area. The East Coast low last night stalled a little bit this morning, overnight, and then started tracking westwards. It was supposed to come further south towards the Sydney metropolitan area. It's now tracking closer towards the southern part of the mid-north coast and the Hunter region. So that now puts the southern mid-north coast down through the Hunter and into the Central Coast and Sydney metropolitan area into the widespread heavy rainfall that we're expecting later today and into tonight. So we're expecting severe weather warnings are current for heavy rainfall and damaging winds, particularly on coastal locations where it could be enough to bring down trees and power lines. Now, rainfall-wise, we're expecting 50 to 150 millimetres today in that part of the world, and we could also see isolated totals in excess of 200 millimetres, particularly with any thunderstorms. Now, that can lead to dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding. Now, focusing on the Hawkesbury and Nepean River. We saw major flooding on the Nepean River last night, particularly upstream, and we have major flooding ongoing at Menangle. And on the Hawkesbury River, we also see major flooding occurring at North Richmond. Now, this major flooding is continuing to move downstream, and we have moderate flooding occurring at both Penrith and Windsor. And we could see major flooding develop at Windsor later today. Now, while rain has eased overnight this morning with showers, we could see that pick up again later this morning and this afternoon. If you check the radar, you can see there's a lot of rain sitting offshore. It's just starting to move into the Hunter area around Newcastle and also down towards the Central Coast and Gosford, and likely to move into the Sydney metropolitan area later this morning and into this afternoon. Now, over the Hawkesbury and Nepean catchment and inland of the Shoalhaven and Wollongong area, I should say, we saw widespread 50 to 150 millimetres since 9 o'clock yesterday, with a few isolated falls in excess of 200 millimetres. Now, that kind of rainfall is likely again today, but further north. So we're talking again similar falls to what we saw around here yesterday, from extending from Newcastle all the way down to the Sydney area, including the Central Coast and Gosford. And just summarising some of those warnings very quickly, major warning at Menangle is now higher than the March 2021 floods, and any renewed rainfall today, we're likely to see that increase as we move into the latter parts of today and tonight as that rain offshore moves in. We also have major flooding, as I mentioned, at North Richmond, and we're also getting moderate flooding through Penrith and Windsor, with major flooding possible around the Windsor area later today, and then moving further downstream, possibly towards Penrith and further downstream tonight and into tomorrow. Now, these levels are similar to the 2021 floods, and on the Nepean River it's actually higher than the 2021 floods. And with that rainfall likely to move into our area later this morning and this afternoon, we're likely to see renewed river level rises on rivers that are already higher as well. Moving further south, we're still getting minor to moderate flooding through the Illawarra area, but the risk is diminishing a little bit to the south coast. We saw around 50 to 100 millimetres there yesterday, particularly northern parts, and we're only expecting another 25 to 50 today. While it's not as heavy as further north, it's still going to lead to some localised issues. But the focus really is today from the Wollongong north and particularly the Sydney metropolitan area, the central coast of New South Wales, including Gosford, and up into the Newcastle and Hunter region, where we're likely to see the heaviest rainfall today as that east coast low moves closer to the coast towards the Hunter area. Major flooding, Nepean, major flooding, Hawkesbury River, major flooding occurring at North Richmond, Menangle, and that will move into the Windsor area today, and moderate flooding through Penrith, likely to increase further today depending on that rainfall. So please be weather aware again today. Stay up to date with the latest forecasts and warnings as we continue to update them regularly. And as always, please listen to all advice from emergency services. And for more information on that, I'll now hand you over to the Commissioner.
Thanks, Premier. Thank you. Good morning. So the New South Wales SES, Police and Emergency Services and the Australian Defence Forces have been busy throughout the night across the whole of the eastern coast of New South Wales. Particularly we're concerned about the Hawkesbury, Nepean and Sydney metropolitan areas, as has been outlined previously by the Bureau of Meteorology. We've issued numerous flood evacuation orders. We've issued numerous warnings. Please be up to date with those because they're still continuing, and we're currently working with the Bureau to analyse the flood levels, to analyse the river rises, and they're much quicker than we had expected and the rains are much heavier. So we will be putting out more orders and warnings as the day goes on. I want to thank those community members who have heeded our messages and moved out very quickly. We gave some very tight timeframes during the night to make sure that people could get out and be safe and move to somewhere that they and their family were safe. At the moment also there are traffic warnings out about the movement across our roads across the metropolitan area, and it is dangerous out there, so I would ask everyone assess whether or not your trip is essential and whether you have to go out through these extremely heavy rains, and the chances of flash flooding across our roads is extreme. I also want to ask the community to look out for your neighbours and friends and family. If you have people that are living in any of these areas or you think that they may be at risk, please contact them. Please go and knock on your neighbour's door. We have had, regretfully, some fatalities during this incident. A couple of those fatalities were elderly people, so I want you to make sure that your neighbours, your friends, your family are safe, and where they need assistance, go and help them evacuate if necessary. There are evacuation centres, and people can move to those evacuation centres where they will be looked after with warmth, food and clothing or whatever is required for them. So the metropolitan area, as outlined by the Bureau, are in for some heavy rainfalls today, and we are seeing higher levels than March 2021. So for those residents near those areas, don't assume that if you weren't affected last year, you won't be affected this year. Please be alert, look on our website, the SES website, keep up to date with the weather and listen to the radio and TV reports in relation to what is happening moment to moment. So not only have we been working in the metropolitan area, but we've also been still working up in the northern rivers. There have been instances where we have had requests for assistance, not life-threatening, but we are responding to those requests for assistance. But we're also going in and doing assessment on the damage and trying to clear those properties and get you back into your homes or businesses as soon as possible. And that's still continuing. I'd remind people, please don't go into those areas that are the subject of an evacuation order because we have not assessed it as safe for you. Also with this weather storms that are coming, there are high winds and there is the chance of trees being uprooted and falling over, and particularly with the saturation levels in the ground, there is a higher risk of storm damage. So be careful when you're going around, don't park under trees, and the falling down of trees may lead to energy and electricity problems, so please be safe and don't go anywhere near those fallen wires. we will be getting teams out there to assess that and fix that up and repair where possible. We've heard today that this storm is difficult to predict. It has had higher rainfalls and it now is appearing to double back into the Hunter and Central Coast area. So we've been working across that area and preparing and making sure we have enough resources up there to help the community. Today will be a very difficult day across the metropolitan area and the Hunter and Central Coast into the night. So again, evacuation orders may come out quite quickly, but we will try and give you a warning with as much time as possible to prepare, put things up, get your valuables, get your emergency kits to leave, and please follow the orders of the SES and the other emergency service agencies and police. It is vital for your safety that you listen to what we're saying and follow those directions. Again, often people will drive through floodwaters thinking that it's safe. If you see floodwaters in front of you, please find another route. Don't assume, because of the nature of your vehicle, that you can get through those floodwaters. There is extensive damage to the road network. There is extensive damage and cut-off on bridges. It is unsafe to travel through floodwaters, and we want to make sure that everyone in the community remains safe, and we want to make sure we don't lose any more lives as a result of this thunderstorm and east coast low that is travelling throughout the state. The risk has not lifted from the south coast, Illawarra and Shoalhaven areas. We are still working in that area as well, preparing the community and making sure that we keep the community safe. So please follow any directions down in that area as well, and please be careful if you're out in the roads. Thank you.
Questions?
Question. You mentioned the elderly. What is the SES doing to ensure the elderly are able to make it to these evacuation centres? Are you solely relying on their neighbours, or do you have transport?
Well, there's a number of ways that they can be helped. One is most of my SES volunteers and personnel are responding to requests for urgent assistance, at doing door knocking and getting people ready. We're working with the welfare agencies in relation to their safety, but we can't be everywhere for every person. So I would ask if family and friends can assist them, that is the best option. If they are in need of help and they can't get out and they are at risk, they should ring 132 500 unless it is life-threatening, and they should ring 000. So there are also working with health in relation to any vulnerable communities such as aged care and hospitals to look after those people as well.
And with the evacuation orders and warnings, are you giving residents enough time to prepare to evacuate? Because residents who are affected by flood in Queensland and Lismore will say that they wish they were given more time.
Okay, I don't think there's a definition of enough time. As soon as we see that there is a risk, we will put out an evacuation warning. As we've heard this morning, the waters are rising much quicker than we had expected. We work with the Bureau of Meteorology in relation to the level of the rise of those rivers. We have a network of observers where there aren't the gauges, and we try and get that information in as quickly as possible. As soon as we're aware of a risk, we will put an evacuation warning out. However, having said that, there were a couple of orders that went out last night because the rivers rose so quickly we could not get the warning out. So we put an evacuation order out if necessary and do an emergency alert so that we can try and put as much information as quickly out to the community, and we use the media resources as well to get that message out. So I'd encourage people to keep listening to their radio, watching the TVs, checking our website so that you're aware and can take notice of the orders or warnings that we give.
Just on the Category D funding that you mentioned yesterday, has the Prime Minister committed to that? When can we expect it to come in, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so my expectation is that announcement will be made imminently, and the discussions over with the Prime Minister is that joint arrangement will be in place, and that funding is a 50-50 arrangement between the Commonwealth Government and the State Government, and covers a range of things: support for primary producers, small business grants, as well as grants to local councils, in addition to that, support for infrastructure. So right across the board, whether it's Category A to D funding, what is most important from my perspective and our government's perspective is we will put every single dollar into getting every community that has been flood affected back on its feet as quickly as possible. And seeing yesterday, being up north yesterday and seeing firsthand, this is going to be a long road. It's going to be a long road, a difficult and challenging one, and it's going to take not just the whole of government, but from a state perspective, but working very closely with the Commonwealth, working very closely with local councils to do everything we can to get these communities back on their feet as quickly as possible. As I said, it's not just, we need to get money in the hands of people who need it, but the clean-up is going to be a substantial operation here for our state. I've seen nothing like it. And I know, as I said earlier, and my heart goes out to those people who are going home today or yesterday and seeing the devastation that all, as the Minister has pointed out, we will be up there as quickly as possible. We know we're sending teams in right across the board to provide that care and support and to start the rebuilding program. But from a financial perspective, that's not an issue. We are going to put whatever we need to help every single person get through this.
Residents in those Northern Rivers areas, many are still cut off and they're running out of food, water, diesel. What is the actual operation to get supplies into that area? I mean, is it Perrotte, is it ADF, how many choppers, where are those supplies coming from?
Well, I might pass to either Shane, but I'll make some opening remarks. And this was very clear yesterday in relation to being in those communities up north that are cut off. Firstly, we're working very closely with the ADF. The ADF has, through helicopters and the like, been able to drop food into those evacuation centres. Yesterday, there were a number of centres that did not have those supplies because of the isolation that they were in. The advice I received yesterday is that those essential supplies were being provided. The coordination was occurring through the police force and the ADF. In addition to that, we're working very closely with freight and making sure that where it's safe to do so, we are bringing essential supplies in. There's obviously an important risk to be balanced in that space, but it's a combination of both. But I might have Shane, if you wanted to speak a bit more in relation to that. But my understanding yesterday was some of those areas that were cut off, that those supplies were not being provided by the end of the day were.
Thank you, Premier. And in terms of resupply now, particularly isolated areas, evacuation centres, it is a cohesive and coordinated effort. It's led through the SES and the police under the emergency management arrangements. The examples you used, we're using all of the above. ADF, contracted, aircraft. We're working very closely with transport to ensure we've got timely and safe access and opening of roads. It's not just about the government entities as well. We meet regularly with state and national supply chain authorities, the big supermarkets, to understand and prioritise support for distribution. That will be ongoing, whether it's diesel supplies, whether it's repairs to infrastructure. Those things are live and coordinated right now. At a nightly basis at the moment, the Minister holds a forum with all the mayors and local members up there in the affected areas, for example, and we're picking up and confirming where those isolations are and putting those arrangements into place. What's also interesting and new for the state of New South Wales, which hasn't been here before, the Rural Fire Service, large water bombing contracted Chinook helicopter that's been here seasonally, has been converted. They've worked with the operators to remove the water tank out of the fuselage of the helicopter, and they've converted that to a cargo carrying machine. It holds about 9 to 10 pallets from memory, which carries about 9.5 to 10 tonnes of produce. That's already been being used, and it's shipped stuff from Sydney up to the north coast, and it's available and supporting the effort to get in and move significant volumes of material and products into areas that need it.
Just 15. You mentioned that the risk was diminishing in the South Coast. So are those communities now out of the woods, or can we expect the weather to ramp up again?
Yeah, no, not at all. Even though we're not expecting a very heavy rainfall and they're not in a severe weather warning, we're still expecting widespread 25 to 50 millimetres. And as we know, right along the coast of New South Wales, from the Queensland border to the Victorian border, everything is wet, everything is saturated, and it only takes just a few millimetres now to start seeing rises on rivers, creeks and streams. So while the threat of the really dangerous and life-threatening weather has moved a little bit further north towards the northern parts of the Illawarra through Sydney Metro, Gosford and the Hunter, the threat for the south coast is still continuing for the next day or so.
Premier,
Yeah.
what is the expected
Yeah, look, currently it did peak overnight, but it's all about the additional rainfall to come. So when we do see this rainfall come in, we're constantly updating our models with the latest observations, with the latest rainfall, and we're continuing to put that into our hydrology models, and our experts of hydrologists are working closely with emergency services as well to keep them updated on what's occurring. So that really depends on how much rainfall, and as I mentioned, we're looking at another 50 to possibly even 150 millimetres around the Hawkesbury Nepean area today into tonight, and if we get that higher level towards that widespread 1 to 150 millimetres, then obviously we're going to see major flooding increase even further to levels in excess of what we saw in March last year.
Premier, you mentioned the crisis policy committee cabinet that you've stood up again. Can you just give us a sense of what that's going to do?
Well, obviously, as I said earlier, we've got a battle on two fronts. We're dealing here with the immediate response in keeping people safe, and that's obviously being coordinated through the State Emergency Operations Centre. But in addition, through the work that Shane is doing, there is a substantial focus right now on the recovery, and standing up this Cabinet Committee will work very closely with the State Emergency Operations Centre above that, so that all ministers those senior ministers of the Cabinet will have operational responsibility, will be engaged every day as we move through this. This is not going to take days or weeks, it's going to take months, and there'll be issues from a local community level that will need to be addressed, and then there's the overarching recovery as well. So that ministerial engagement is incredibly important to run alongside the operational work that is occurring here in Homebush.
And in terms of a clean-up bill, Josh Frydenberg this morning said, this could run into over $1 billion, into the billions. What's your thoughts looking at the situation now?
Well, it's early days, but from what I saw yesterday, there's going to be a substantial cost. But what's more important to me is getting everybody through it, getting every community back on its feet. We've gone through, in terms of the investment the government's made, whether it's been droughts and bushfires and floods and the pandemic, we've always taken the approach here in our state that our focus is on our people, and that's what we're going to do. And to see those scenes firsthand with the Minister yesterday, it's going to be a substantial operation. But ultimately, budgets are there to serve one purpose, our people, and that's our focus. And we're going to get every single person back on their feet as quickly as possible. And I know that there would be many heartbreaking scenes for people across our state today. It's going to be tough, and many people will feel isolated. I don't want you to feel that way. We are going to be doing everything we can to be with you side by side as we get through this, and we will get through it just like we've got through every crisis of the past.
Is your government offering additional, I know we've got the disaster grants that people can access through the Services Australia, but are there going to be additional grants, just New South Wales based, that people can access through Service New South Wales mechanisms that you've used in the past? Yeah,
the main thing right now is to get the category A, B, C and D funding off the ground, and where there are gaps, we will fill them. We will fill them. You don't know sometimes what are the challenges that are going to come our way, where the need is going to be. What is important from a government perspective is when that need arises, it's identified and we respond to it. So I want to get, and the other point is getting money out the door as quickly as possible. There will be farmers who have lost everything, absolutely everything, as a result of what's occurred in the last week. This is going to be an incredibly difficult time, and as I said, this battle on two fronts, that there are people who are now going back to their homes, back to their businesses, and some still not able to do that as we wait for the flood waters to recede, whilst at the same time we're dealing with, we've got the SCS at the moment dealing with rescues. So this is a real challenge, but we'll get through, and from a government perspective, we will be there every step of the way. And it's going to be a long journey, but I'm confident we'll get through it, just like we've got through everything in the past.
Premier, do you think that raising the Warragamba Dam wall would protect communities in situations such as this?
Well, I think there's a lot of merit in that work that we've been doing over the last 10 years. It's a complex, it's a complex issue. There's no doubt about that. in terms of the work that's gone through the EIS, the business case work in terms of how you'll structurally make that change. But the government continues to work through those issues. That is a project that's not going to happen overnight. That is a project the government has been working on for some time, and it is in our pipeline of projects that we will deliver. But there are a lot of issues that need to be worked through and already have been worked through. But ultimately, the role of government is to keep people and communities safe, and we should look at every option available to us to do that.
Given we keep getting hit by these floods, it's only 12 months on. I mean, is there a sense of urgency about that project? The Warragamba Dam proposal began in 2016. When do you want to see that delivered by?
I've seen that Warragamba Dam proposal even prior to that. I think the government has been working on that proposal since 2011, and we've gone through EIS after EIS, business case after business case, and I want to see us getting to a point where that project is delivered.
But by when?
Well, the construction, my understanding is the construction of that wall would take years. So it's not a project that will occur overnight. But what we need to be doing is making sure that we don't just focus every time there's a flood or every time there's a fire on the recovery, that we do more when it comes to prevention. And if anything, we've gone through such a tough 4 years here with the drought, the fires and the floods, it would be remiss of any government following all of this to not be sitting back and saying, okay, what could be done better on prevention? What could be done better on recovery? What could be done better on support? And I'll be making sure it's exactly what we do.
Have we done enough in those areas since the last floods? Because there are areas like in Lower Portland that are getting really hit today, and locals there are actually saying they're cut off again from roads that still haven't been repaired from last year's flood. So have we been proactive enough since the flood last year to keep moving?
I think there's no doubt in this country we're always subject to major natural disasters, and we can't humanly prevent them, whether that's fires or floods. But if there are things that we can do to help mitigate against the damage, then any good government would look at it, and that's what we will do. But let's get through this. Let's just get through this. We still have people who are isolated. There are people sitting in evacuation centres who need supplies. There are people who need to get into housing. That is the focus right now. But absolutely, these are good questions to ask. And if there are things that we could be improving in terms of infrastructure investment to mitigate against the impacts of floods and fires, we will do it. Thanks, everyone.